Do you remember when the WoW dev said this in an interview?
You should be able to like solo scenarios. There's the option of going in a group or solo. Same with dungeons. We expect people will want to do that. As far as raids, I think that's just going to be a challenge that's up to the players. Like maybe in small groups, less than the normal expected amount. But I mean, we're anxious to see if people are going to solo them. Like we want to see that content. We want to see that happen. Like let us know if you're up for the challenge and if you can, we want to, we definitely want to see players trying that for sure.
Well, I thought I will make them proud, and I will do exactly what they want us to do, soloing all of the content in WoW Remix. The rules are very simple. No grouping is allowed at any stage, and I also can't benefit from other people. Let's say if they are doing world bosses with 10 people, I can't just join in and tag the world boss and get the reward. If I would like to do world bosses, I have to make sure that it's completely solo and without any other input. Obviously, I also can't use the dungeon finder or any other grouping tool because that will put me into a group. What are my goals? Well, goal number 1 is reaching level 70. Along the way, I want to do all of the dungeons on normal and heroic difficulty. I also want to make sure I do all of the raids on normal difficulty as they go along. At level 70, I want to grind out all of the heroic raids, and lastly, I want to try and complete Mythic Siege of Orgrimmar. Whether that will work, we'll find out later. But for now, we start on a starter island on a fresh new demon hunter by obtaining our cloak. As I do have a main, my cloak's already the max rank I can have on an alt due to unlocking all the infinite power achievements. If you don't know, or you're starting your first ever character, obtaining threads will unlock a series of achievements. Infinite power 1 through 12. Each achievement obtained will increase the power your cloak starts at on alts, with 12 being the highest rank and giving you 150 main stat, 750 stam, 150 verse, and 100% experience gain. To upgrade your cloak, you have to find these things called threads around the world, and they drop from about everything you can do. After skipping the intro quest, I enter the first questline into Pandaria, skipping the epic intro cinematic as I go. Once I handed in the first quest, I immediately stopped questing. The reason for this is simple. I want to gather as many threads as possible while keeping my level as low as possible. When I level up, my power will decrease due to the in-game scaling mechanisms, so if I want to stay strong enough to solo content, I want to buff my cloak while remaining at as low as a level as possible. How will I do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. I make my way to the closest Infinite Bazaar, a remix exclusive found on your map by these little house icons with an hourglass next to it. These are your remix hubs, so to say. They offer dailies, transmog and mount vendors, item upgraders, and so on. You can find one in each zone, so they are never far away. Now, I said I wasn't going to be doing quests, however dailies will be an exception. They give a limited amount of experience, but they also reward us with a spool. Spools are basically a bunch of threads. Increasing rarity of spools, increase the amount of threads you gain from them. The first ones I can get at this level will be the green ones, which are the lowest rank spools, but these will upgrade as I level up. At the moment, there is only one daily I can complete without grouping, which is the dungeon one. At least, that's what I thought at the time. So I head down to the only dungeon accessible to me. Again, the only dungeon I thought at the time was accessible to me. We'll get back to that point later. This dungeon is Temple of the Jade Serpent. I make my way to the temple, change the difficulty to heroic, and start making my way through. And soon enough I get to the first boss, Wise Mary. Which, at this point, does not really form a challenge to me. My cloak is so strong for my level that I barely take any damage, and I do quite a bit of damage. Further to this, Wise Mary does not have many mechanics, but he does take 99% reduced damage. He regularly spawns an ad, which puts a dot on you and throws a water bomb at your feet at intervals. Every ad you take down removes 25% effectiveness from Wise Mary's shield, until 4 ads are dealt with and his bubble bursts. But in most cases you can defeat Wise Mary before the last ad at this level, ignoring the entirety of phase 2. While looting, you might see that I do not pick up the extra experience. As explained before, I do this to try and remain at low level as possible for as long as I can. The game then goes on to teach me some of the remix only mechanics. One of them is the first part of the gem system, which is prismatic gems. These gems are allocated to a specific stat and you can slot these into prismatic slots on your gear. The gem starts out as green quality, but combining 3 of them creates 1 of an increased rarity, but for the same stat. The highest rank is legendary, taking 27 green gems to achieve. The game also teaches me to scrap at this point, allowing you to get rid of any loot you don't want, and converting them into bronze. Bronze in turn is used as a currency in this mode, allowing you to upgrade your gear or buy cosmetics or do whatever you want with it. At level 70, I will need about 500,000 of this to upgrade my gear, so better start stocking up soon. Soon after Wise Mary, I get served some humble pie in the courtyard before getting back up and taking my revenge. After clearing the courtyard, Leo Flameheart rises up, challenging me next. Yeah, it was a multi-phased fight, which again is slightly trivialized by my cloak right now. The main thing she does is a close-range AoE roundhouse kick, which shoots out flames, and a heavy-hitting tank buster. In the first phase, the tank buster leaves a nasty dot, while in the second phase it puts an absorb shield on the target. And in the last phase, she changes into Yulon the Dragon and tries breathing fire on targets. Just step out of the way and you'll be done in no time. This gets me to level 11, which unlocks my first talent in the Vengeance tree, Foul Devastation. A nasty AoE breath in front of me, which will surely come in handy to tackle some of the bigger pulls. I quickly stop to make some mouse over macros before continuing on, just so I don't have to click my Infernal Leap anymore, and to make a nice loop I go for the final boss of the instance first, the Shah of Doubt. Not many mechanics here either, he does put a dot on me, which hurts quite a bit, and which I cannot get rid of yet. Aside from that, he has an intermission phase where he spawns an evil clone of the players that you need to defeat before continuing back to phase 1. The dot ticks hard, and by the skin of my teeth I clutch the victory, earning me the first dungeon achievement. Clearing a heroic dungeon also gives you a dungeon achievement for normal. The important part of these achievements are that they give spools, and if you remember from before, these give a hefty amount of stats, which at level 11 are quite crazy. For a normal dungeon achievement you get a green uncommon spool and 500 bronze, while for a heroic one you get a blue rare spool and 1000 bronze. Now let's see what the spools do to my stats. Green spool lands on mastery, while the blue spool grants me 150 versatility, giving me about 30% extra versatility, which means that I do 30% extra damage just from this one blue spool, which is quite crazy. And while the dungeon is completed, I have one more boss to go, and this boss has a random chance of being one of two encounters. Either you fight two Yongles, or you battle some Suns, and then they become Shah, and then they take over some guy. To be honest, I get the Sun encounter, I have no clue how it works or what the mechanics are. You just basically take it down. After this last encounter, I make my way out of the dungeon to go and do something else. Firstly, I go back to the bazaar and hand in my daily quest, again rewarding me with a spool. Now, as dungeons will be quite a big part of my leveling process, right now there's some other things I would like to do. And there are some achievements out there that don't give much experience but give quite a bit of spools and bronze, so I'll start off with those. And the first one of those is exploration. So I mount my dragon and fly all around the map, starting with the Jade Forest, then Kunlai Summit, Townlong Steppes, Dread Wastes, Valley of the Four Winds, Krasarang Wilds, and lastly Vale of the Eternal Blossoms. Unfortunately, exploration does give some experience, which gets me to level 15 by the end of this, reducing my stats quite a bit, but let's see if the mountain of threads I got can make up for it. I was hoping one of these would land on haste, given that it's a very low stat at the moment, but I'll make do with the stam mastery and verse that I got from these. Next up are the treasure achievements. For these you need to obtain some of the treasures in each zone, which in hindsight I could have combined with flying around. Or could I? When I spot a rare I also make sure to hunt them down, as they can grant some achievements as well after taking down multiple ones in the same zone. In the Jade Forest I pick up the treasure in this ship and this coin in this pond, and to my surprise these achievements actually give rare spools. For now this is where the treasure journey ends, as I didn't realize before, but you actually have to be the minimum level required for the zone to gather the treasures in that zone. So I guess I'll come back later. The blue spool from the achievement however gives me haste, and it increases my haste by a whopping 45%. Thank you, scaling. And now it's back to the dungeon grind. Upon felling Wise Mary once more, I get rewarded by some new gems, unique to Pandaria Remix. One of them is a Tinker gem, going in their respective Tinker slots. These gems have special effects which cover a wide area from damage, healing, and other utility abilities. The third type of gems are Cogwheel gems. These are utility abilities from a variety of classes and specs. Examples of those are Door of Shadows, Disengage, Dark Pact, Stampeding Roar, and more. You will only have one Cogwheel gem slot at a time, which is found in your feet gear piece. I slot some of the Tinker gems I got and continue on in the dungeon. After beating Shah of Doubt one more time, I get rewarded with level 16 as well as the headpiece with a meta gem. Now the meta gems are the last part of the new gems that are unique to WoW Remix. A meta gem has an active ability which has quite a strong effect and can only be slotted in your headpiece, and you can only have one at a time. The first one I get is Tireless Spirit, removing all resource costs from abilities by 100% for a couple of seconds. Not the best one, not really the one I want to play with later, but you know what, it's a good start. After a lengthy dungeon grind to level 20, my stats and Tinker setup looks like this. I can already see my stats have been going down quite a bit while leveling, so I think it is time to get some more threads. Starting off with the treasures in Valley of the Four Winds at Krasarang Wilds. Both of these give me agility, which actually almost doubles the agility I had before looting these spools. Some days go by before I get to play again, so go pick up the daily and make my way to the newly unlocked dungeon, the Stormstout Brewery. When you run in, the first few mobs are being empowered by these little sprites around the room. If you hit the ones that are buffing the big mobs, they'll lose a chunk of HP and damage. We run in further and we soon hit the quota of kills to spawn the first boss. Ook Ook does not have many mechanics. He has a frontal slam which stuns everyone, and he keeps buffing himself with more attack speed and damage. Regularly, barrels will spawn around the arena, which you can click on and ride. If you roll these into the boss, he will gain a stacking damage taken increase. So roll as many of these into the boss as you can, just to make the fight a lot easier. Zooming to the second boss, Hoptalis has little mechanics as well. He spawns some ads which, if you pick up one of these hammers, you can slam them into the air and make them disappear. And aside from that, he does a whirlwind, which you can get away from if it does a bit too much damage. And he also does a frontal coward breath, which he spins around, so just avoid that. The final boss, Yanju, was always an interesting one. The boss's abilities depend on the waves of enemies you fight before him. In my case, I get to deal with Blackout Brew, a debuff that sleeps you at 10 stacks, but degrades when you move, Wall of Suds, 2 walls that move across the room, which you can jump over with the increased jump you get for this mechanic, and lastly Bubble Shield. Bubbles spawn around the boss, reducing his damage taken for each one alive. AoE these down before focusing the boss again. Shortly after, Yanju falls, netting me another achievement for both normal and heroic Stormstout Brewery, with Threads awarding me some mastery and stam. After this I hand in the daily, granting me a bit more agility as well. Now, as I alluded to before, I thought you could not reach any of the dungeons that are not on Pandaria, and you couldn't do any solo scenarios. Now I was quite wrong. If you go to Lorewalker Cho in the Vale of the Eternal Blossoms found right here, you find 3 NPCs. One of them to queue for normal scenarios, one of them to queue for heroic scenarios, and one of them to queue for the 3 dungeons that you can't access on Pandaria. With that discovery, we got quite some dungeons and scenarios to do. So let's cue the music. After all these dungeons and scenarios are over, I've actually hit level 26, and I have a ton of threads to add to my cloak. Unfortunately, a lot of these pools give me a bunch of stamina drops, which are not really necessary right now, but I'll take anything I can get. And in the end I end up with a cloak with 5,316 threads. Level 25 is also quite a significant level. It opens up a new dungeon in Shadowpan Monastery, 3 new scenarios for me to do, a new treasure achievement for me to go after, and last but not least, it opens up the first raid, Mogushan Vaults. Will I be able to overcome this challenge? Stay tuned for the next video.